end of this, this workshop, there are 3 essential things I want you to be able to walk away with, right? I want you to be more cognizant of rental red flags, right? That way, it's like things that that you should look out for, and maybe rethink, right, your decision around renting a particular place. Secondly, I hope that you gain strategies and new tools for better communication with your landlord, so that you have a great working relationship, and hopefully, you get all of the information that you need so that repairs are done, rent's paid on time, those sort of things. And then lastly, I would like to share with you some resources that I hope that you bookmark, right? So both legal and financial related resources for renters. And may I just say, again, any questions that you may have, enter it in the chat, or save it for the last 5 to 10 minutes for the question and answer portion. If any point in time you need to walk away to handle your own personal business, I trust that you'll be able to do so when you're getting a drink of water or having to use the restroom. So just come back when you're ready. Okay. So I went over SparkPoint. Before we get started, I do kind of want to address the current housing climate. These are updates that we have as of yesterday. So August 31st, 2020, things are constantly changing. And so this information may be out of date by Friday or next month, but this is what we're currently dealing with COVID-19 and the shelter-in-place order. What do we know, right, about the housing climate or the rental climate here in the Bay Area during this time? Well, we know that many individuals and families are impacted, right? Whether they've had their hours reduced or whether they lost their jobs and maybe are unable to pay for the rent because of the shelter-in-place order. And so this whole spring, or the spring semester and summer, at least within San Mateo County, and I'll only speak to San Mateo County because every county in the Bay Area is completely different. But I believe most international students and some of the students here, right, they're at least living within San Mateo County. You'll see that there was an eviction moratorium. So let's just say that your hours were reduced or your income was reduced. Maybe you're relying on, public benefit and unemployment to help pay for your expenses for your household. What we know is that technically the eviction moratorium ended on August 31st. So that means then anyone who was unable to pay their rent from March through August, right, they now have to think of a plan to help, pay back the back rent that they may have owed for those months, and plan moving forward so they can pay for rent for the future months. But in October, as of yesterday, one of San Mateo County's top judge, right, issued an order to pause enforcement of those evictions, right? So your landlord potentially can issue you an eviction notice, but that has to go through the court, right? Through the local courts. San Mateo County's judge has said, right, they're not going to enforce it because of all of the crazy things that are happening, right? With the fires, with the pandemic, right? With all the impact of folks' income. And so that will happen through October 2nd. On a statewide level, right, folks need to still vote on this, right? Our Congress, or our leaders in California, they still need to vote on this. So it's not set in stone quite yet, but it may provide some relief. So they have, set forth a bill that said that they would extend the evictions through January of 2021. However, it would require renters from September through January to pay 25%. and to figure out a plan for back rent. Again, if you have any questions about these updates, we'll talk about it during the question and answer portion, or you can always schedule an appointment with me and we can talk about your options. But this workshop really today, why I wanted to present the housing climate, the current housing climate, is really around how to support new renters, right? So if you're in crisis, again, I encourage you to reach out to me after this presentation, but I hope that you can still find the information that we're going to share still useful, right? As it's for folks who are new to the game and maybe need some guidance around how to handle, you know, their new potential rental spot. So I'm going to throw this out to the group, and Aubrey, if you could help me out, right? I wanted to ask you, what are some things that you should be aware of before you sign that contract, you sign that lease with a potential landlord or homestay or roommate?
You can unmute if you like to speak, or you could type in the chat, either way, just based on your experience. Anybody? Looking back from my own experience, I think it's always important to find out what terms you are signing into. The terms will be the rent, how much you are liable for or you're responsible for, and what happens if something doesn't work, how you can, as a renter, you can get help. That's the two things that comes to mind.
Yeah, no, thank you, Aubrey. And definitely that's on this list. So I'm going to go through it a little bit. I know it looks like a lot of text, but this is a conversation, right, with all of us. Before you sign the lease, I think the number one thing that folks underestimate, right, is creating a budget, right? Looking at your income and your current expenses and figuring out, can you afford this place that you would like to rent, right? Like, let's just say my income is $1,000 and I still have to pay for gas, I still have to pay for food, I still have to pay for other educational costs, right? And then you're looking at an apartment of $2,000 that costs $2,000. Do you think that my income a month, do you think I could afford to pay for that apartment on a monthly basis? What do you guys think?
You better have a good income to cover, to be able to cover that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, don't forget to unmute yourselves because I see some mouths moving, but like, yeah, don't forget to unmute yourself if you want to respond, okay? Secondly, so yeah, creating a budget, even if it's on paper or an Excel sheet, but really tracking your expenses and figuring out what's going to make the most sense for your life, right? And really sticking to it, sticking to your budget. So that way you're not caught off guard and, you know, maybe have to move out of this new place that you've already spent so much money on, right, with the deposit and application fee. So you definitely want to be cognizant of your expenses. Something else is, even with a homestay, y'all, like you should visit them. Before you commit, you should visit. It's almost like relationships, right? Before you get into a relationship, you got to date a little bit, right? You got to see if this person's right for you. So you visit the rental, see what it looks like. What does the neighborhood look like? You want to take a note of the surrounding location, right? If you're someone who takes public transportation from, you know, to school or to work, wherever, you want to make sure that, you know, there's a bus stop, hopefully within a couple miles of you, right? So that you're not relying so much on Uber or Lyft, because those costs can really drive up your total household expenses. And you may not be able to, again, save money or, you know, spend more on any other areas of your budget, like food or entertainment. So you'll want to see, right, if you feel safe in that neighborhood, right, or if you have noisy neighbors, right, you want to just kind of put your ant antennas on and just kind of soak it all in, right? What does this place feel like for me as the potential renter? Next, what you should really come prepared with is a list of questions, right? Write them down before you even visit the rental and talk with your potential roommates, your homestay folks, and your landlord. So I'm going to jump ahead to the next screen so that you can see what kind of questions that you could potentially ask. So, so that again, you're not caught off guard, right? Everyone is transparent. You're very clear of the expectations, you know, of your landlord and of yourself as the renter. So one is like, how do I pay my rent, right? So simple. These are super simple questions. How do I pay my rent? Is it by physical check? Is it on a portal that I have to log in and then, you know, do a direct deposit to my landlord, right? When is my rent due? Is it on the 30th, the 1st, the 15th? Because I will tell you that I've heard horror stories where students didn't ask these questions, or maybe it wasn't written in their lease. And, you know, they thought that their rent was due on the 1st, but it was really due on the 30th of every month. Even just that, you know, that day or 2-day difference, depending on what month it is, right? They were putting themselves at risk for creating a rift, you know, with their landlord and with their roommates. So being really clear about those really, you know, small details is huge for you. You'll also want to know what happens if my rent is late, because that may happen, right? Life happens, emergencies happen. So you want to figure out what is the game plan, right, if my rent is late. Initial thing is you'll want to know what other utility costs are there. Are you responsible not just for the rent, but maybe for garbage, for water, you know, for electricity, right? Or if it's all inclusive. If it's all inclusive, meaning that all utilities are paid for, then that's a pretty good deal, right? It doesn't mean additional funds out of your pocket to pay for those things, especially internet, right? Not all places will offer, you know, inclusive internet costs. Sometimes you'll have to pay for that separately, and you'll have to call, you know, the phone company in to even set that up. So these are all additional funds that you have to spend on if it's not a part of your lease agreement. I will make sure to share this presentation with Aubrey later so that Aubrey, you can share it with the students. But again, these are key questions that you want to be able to ask your roommate and your landlord before you sign that lease. Because once you sign that lease, you know, you're really committing to whatever that lease is, whether it's 6 months or to a year or even 2 years. And you want to make sure that you safeguard yourself so that you know how to navigate through the process. So other questions here, like what's the pet policy if you have pets, right? How do I contact the property manager? What's the parking situation if you have a car? Yeah, okay. I'm gonna jump back. So the next thing is really around credit scores, right? Especially for our international students who may not have credit scores when they're trying to rent an apartment outside of the college, right? So you really want to be careful of how you share this information with your landlord, because for some landlords, they will ask for an application, right? And they may ask for histories of credit, references, right, from people who know you and can speak of your character and how you are as a renter, as well as maybe a co-signer, right? So if you don't have a credit score, who can speak to your financial health? So be careful of how you share that information with. You want to be on guard at all times. You want to be aware of any hidden fees. Everything should be laid out in writing, not just shared with you verbally, right? If it's shared out verbally, It's not in a contract, which means that in the event that something happens to you, if this is a scam, or maybe your landlord acts a little shady, or maybe if your roommates are a little shady, right? If you happen to go to court or have to speak with a different authority, right? Without things in writing, you have no protections. So if there's anything that I can share with you that is the most important theme of the day, right? It's documentation, physical documentation, everything in writing, always with receipts, right? Because those are your safeguards so that you can get your money back, right? So that you're not scammed. Aubrey, you mentioned that there was a student who experienced something similar, without giving away who this person is, but can you kind of talk about the experience of the international student?
So this is one of the unfortunate events that I dealt with last year. International student, an international student was renting from someone, but the student did not know that my landlord was also renting. So in other words, the student was renting as a sublease, using a sublease to rent it from the landlord who's also renting. And then, as it turned out, the house owner decided to sell the home. So therefore, the student plus the landlord who is also renting both got kicked out of the house.
Aubrey, I think your mic is getting worse again.
Yeah.
I apologize. Am I not coming through my voice?
Oh.
It's just that your mic is making a buzzing sound.
Sound like a robot. Oh no. Okay. So I apologize. I don't know why this happened, but I will make Nicole your the host.
Yeah. That's okay. Y'all, we're all being flexible. You know, sometimes there's wonky things that happen over Zoom. We're just going to be really kind and flexible with all of the things that are happening. But from what I recall with the student story, right, was that the owner of the home, without telling the student, because especially the student didn't have a formal lease agreement, the the owner decides to move without telling the student, and the student had no protection, so they had to scramble. They had to figure out a place where they could stay, right? If that student had some sort of rental agreement, there would be a stopgap measure to provide them with protections. So again, everything has to be written in writing, even if it's a sublease. Like, let's just say there's a lot of international students, or students in general, right, that move in together in an apartment and they all live together. If there's only one student's name on the lease, right, there are very few protections for the people that are renting under this student, right? So you may not be able to have the same kind of communication with your landlord. Repairs might take longer. I would like to hope that, people are kind and honest, right? But what we know is that things happen. And so, you may be rooming with a person that may take advantage of you and may make you pay twice the amount of rent that they're paying, right? And you may get the smaller room. So you really want to make sure that, again, you have everything in writing and that you're developing a really transparent relationship with not just your roommates, your landlord, and with if you're staying in any homestays. Okay. Secondly, this is really, really important. And I'll even tell you a personal story. So when I first moved out of my parents' home, I was 18 and I was new to the game. I was subleasing with another college student. And I made the mistake of paying my deposit and walking away and thinking and trusting that they would share with me the keys, right? So the deposit is $500. I don't know about you, but $500 is a lot of money for a college student, right? $500, it's like several months of gas and food, right? And maybe some school materials. And so my mistake was not doing that at the same time, right? So the day that you pay your deposit and in that same interaction, right, when you're approved for that lease, you should also receive your keys. This is a way that you could avoid scams, right? This has happened to many, many families here in the Bay Area and elsewhere, right? Where they were told to pay the deposit and then they come back and, you know, for some reason they didn't have, like, there was no way to get into the apartment they were trying to rent. It was a scam. So make sure that you're really cognizant of those things. Lastly, take a lot of photos of the rental. Share it with your landlord. Make sure that the photos are, or the conversation, right, whether it's text or email, is time stamped, that there's a date and time that states like when you sent and share this information. And the reason why that you want to take photos of your rental is that in the event that when you move out, your landlord may pin, you know, some like scratches on the wall or, you know, broken features or fixtures in your household, maybe something wrong with the bathroom, and they can withhold your deposit, meaning that they don't give your deposit back to you. So again, right, if you pay down $500 as a deposit and you're hoping to get that back once you leave that rental, you may not get that back because your landlord has the ultimate say around the terms of how you receive that money back. And so those photos are kind of like proof that, hey, this place was good before we rented, you know what I mean? Or there were some minor things that were wrong with the apartment. Please take note of it and don't charge me, landlord, when I move out. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Actually, yeah, okay, that's good. Can we move forward? Okay, we went over the key questions. So what should you do after you sign your lease? This is super, super important. Again, theme of the day, documentation, documentation, documentation. Any kind of communication that you have with your landlord and with your roommates, always get it in writing. Never delete your texts or your email exchanges with your roommates or landlord when it comes to like the actual rent and like repairs, the status of your place. If it's just like memes and jokes, you know, feel free to delete those or do whatever you want with them. But the things that you really want to document and maybe store on your Google Drive, right? Take screenshots, store it in your Google Drive, scan it, store it in your Google Drive, are really the things around repairs, your lease, right? Things that are not being met according to your lease agreement, right? Because again, it's your proof. If the things that you have are not in writing, it doesn't exist, right, under the eyes of the law. So make sure that you always have documentation. The last thing is really around repairs. So for, especially for young people, right? Or, you know, for maybe introverts. I know I was very introverted when I first started renting an apartment. I was afraid of talking to people, right? I didn't want to bother my landlord. I didn't want to bother my roommates, right? If something was wrong. If there was too much noise, or if the sink needed to be fixed, if the toilet was broken, right? I tried to like YouTube something and try to fix it on my own. But what I realized is that, you know, there are some things that I can't fix by myself, and I need to notify my roommates. I need to notify my landlord. It's within your right as a renter. You have it's written within law, right? The rental laws, that you must have access to a safe and habitable like rental, right? So it must be safe for you, and the sinks and the toilets and the heat, all of that must work, right? And if it's not, you can report that to your landlord so that they can have it done and get it fixed. So now we're gonna transition to sharing more information about some strategies and tools so that you can have better communication with your landlord or with your roommates or with your homestay family. I think I don't want to beat a dead horse, right? Always written documentation. Something that a lot of, again, new roommates may not create, or even with your homestay family, right? Is just a list of agreements. What do you agree to, right? Some of you may be night owls, right? And your lights are on, you maybe be blasting music in the room, and you may be living with people who are like, I'm in bed by 9 o'clock and I need complete shut eye, right? I need to be asleep because that's how I function. I need like 9 hours of sleep. So you want to be clear around expectations, around just living arrangements and even chores, right? What expectations do they have of me with my dishes, with cleaning my room and our shared spaces, right? Because at the end of the day, you're living with other people. And if you want to have a great relationship with them, you at least want to know what's on the table, how you can maintain a copacetic and like peaceful living environment. And that means talking about how you're going to live together, right? And again, right, you're archiving your email exchanges, you're screenshotting texts with timestamps, you're keeping things in Google Drive. Those are all good tips. I would also say that if you have to write a notice to your landlord, right? Maybe about if you have to break a lease, or maybe if you, like, for some reason you have to go home, or you have to change the place where you're living, or maybe there's a repair that you need, right? Or maybe you have questions around your lease. Your best tool is always going to be Google, right? You can Google templates of these letters, right? You can type in repair rental template, right? And what's so great about Google is that it's going to give you all these different kinds of examples. So if you're someone who's like, I really don't know what to say or how to ask it, there are templates that exist on the internet that you can utilize so that you know exactly what to say to your landlord. And again, you can always reach out to SparkPoint, right? And maybe that's a conversation that we're having about, especially when it comes to your breaking a lease or ending a lease or just asking for repairs, right? There are tons of templates out there. Okay. So I do want to share with you some really important legal and financial related resources that are available to renters, including our international students. So let's just say that you have a housing issue, just like the student that we mentioned previously, who was basically, out of a place to live, right? So you can contact the Bay Area Legal Aid. They have housing preservation services. And so that means, an advice line with a lawyer or consultant about what your rights are, right? So that you'll know how to move forward and how to manage that relationship with your roommates or landlord, right? They'll tell you, here's the law, here are your rights within the law, and your next steps.
And that service is for free, or do you have to pay for it?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. This is free. It is completely free, right?
Cool.
So you can take a look at their website, make sure you're looking at the housing preservation services, or you can just call their advice line. You may be required to leave a message and they'll contact you in a few days because they're just so busy with all of these evictions, but you will hear back from someone to go over whatever your particular concern is. Lastly, the core agencies of San Mateo County, they're a network of nonprofits within the county that offer coordinated entry and rental assistance programs. Coordinated entry basically means it's like, temporary housing for folks who are at risk of being homeless, right? And rental assistance, so help with payments for rent and the utilities. So you don't have to be a green card holder, right? You don't have to be a US resident in order to access their safety net services, right? If you have questions about, making payments for rent, they offer short-term, so one time only rental assistance funds for our community members. And what I know so far is that this is still available even during shelter in place. They're awarding people as fast as they can. Again, it's only a small and short-term resource, but it's there, right, when you need it. And again, SparkPoint, right? Like, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any of your questions when it comes to housing or your tenant rights or just the legal or financial resources that are available to you, right? We want you to feel comfortable, especially if you're staying in this country and you're studying at CSM. We want you to feel like you have all of the resources available. So again, here's our website, our email address, our phone numbers, and of course, our Instagram handle, which I have to update. It's so tough these days. But I want to welcome any one of you who has questions. Aubrey, was there anything in the chat?